The 2018 movie Ready Player One. You know Ready Player One? Yes, we got some woos. Now here's the thing. It's a book, isn't it? Yeah, so the book, the it's a book crowd, why don't you just get it all out at me right now? Why don't you get it out? Yeah, it's a book. It's a book first, yeah. Whatever year it was, sure. Get it out. It tells a story about a game creator named James Halliday who's created an immersive online world called the Oasis, where you can show up, put on your VR headset and all sorts of different kind of virtual reality enhancing accoutrement and get in and do kind of whatever you want, because you can do whatever you want in the Oasis is kind of the point. And he creates this thing and it becomes this huge hit, and basically when you get into the world, I think the story takes place in 2045, and when you actually get into that world, you know, predictably, real life is on the decline, and virtual life is all people care about. So people are just spending all their time in the Oasis doing whatever it is they want to do, all this sort of stuff. And there's an interesting theme that runs through the movie, and I'm assuming also the book, although I can't say for sure, about rules, and about getting the balance of the rules right such that people can show up in the Oasis and have fun and play, which is really what it's about. And yet, getting the balance of the rules right such that the play isn't stifled, and yet, on the other hand, bad things don't happen because the rules were just not there at all. And there's an interesting scene about a third of the way through the film where James Halliday, again, the game creator, is in an argument with his business partner about this exact question and what sort of things they need to do, what rules they need to institute, do they need to mature the company, all these sorts of things. And his business partner says this to him. He says, if you make something people want or need, then it's up to you to set the limits. You have to make some rules. And James Halliday replies, I don't want to make any more rules. I'm a dreamer. And he resists the idea that he's got to put limits around things and make more rules. And the question, what kind of rules are needed in order to live a good life, is really a question that's underneath the film. And there's some cool stuff, actually, if you go into it. James Halliday has set up this quest that people have to go on, and a lot of the answers to the quest involve rule breaking. They involve things you didn't think you could do that you kind of got to go out of your way to do anyways. The issue within the Oasis is that as they remove rules, it creates a place where people can play and have fun, awesome, but the lack of rules also creates an opportunity for bad actors to show up and exploit the system because the system is so free. Additionally, and this is a question that's really asked over time in the film, because there are no rules of participation in the Oasis, if people get addicted to the Oasis or to something they're doing in the Oasis, there's no rules to help them overcome their addiction. And the idea that real life is the only thing that's real is a big theme in the film, and the idea that we need rules at sometimes, not just to help us live a good life, but to keep me away from the things that without any limits on them, they will take over my life and run my life because they're just way more powerful than me. Rules, it's a complicated question about how to get the balance of rules right in our lives, and maybe you have wondered over time in your life whether or not you could live in a world without rules. Have you ever wanted to live in a world without rules? Have you ever just felt get off me? Stop it with the rules. Stop it with the standards. Stop it with the whatever it is. Just get away. And there's something in us, in our time, in our city, in our spirits. It's I just want to be as least inhibited as possible. And any kind of rule or standard that comes from the outside is it feels just so constricting. And I'm locked up and bound up and tied up. And maybe you want to get out of all that. Maybe some of you have experienced particularly chaotic environments in your life where there were no rules, and you experienced all the bad stuff that happened from that. And so you're hearing me talk about this world without rules fantasy, and you're I know firsthand that would be awful. Because when there are no rules, terrible things happen. When there are no rules, people behave badly. When there are no rules, it just becomes a power game. Who's strongest? They get to do whatever they want. When there are no rules, actually everything devolves and falls apart. And so we live in this particular kind of tension, and yet the Bible has all sorts of wonderful things to say about the rules and the way that they're supposed to function in our lives. The Bible says that God gives us rules so that we will live, and so that we will live good lives. The Bible says that God has saved us from any guilt or punishment or penalty that could come from getting the rules wrong. And the Bible says that God can help me live a better life now if I would stop resisting him and take on his teaching in my life. We're picking back up in our sermon series on Deuteronomy. We're walking through the book of Deuteronomy this year. We are moving into our second section of this sermon series. The first section, which we went through in January through March, was the How Did We Get Here section. It was Deuteronomy chapters 1 through 3. It's really telling the prologue of how we got here. God's got some stuff to say to his people in the book of Deuteronomy, but first we're going to say, how did we get here? We just wrapped all that up. You can listen to those sermons online. We're moving into the second section now of Deuteronomy, which is from Deuteronomy chapters 4 to 11, and this is really about the heart of the law. So it's interesting, in the structure of Deuteronomy, God's going to give the children of Israel some rules in Deuteronomy. If you didn't know that, that's what's coming. The rules are coming. But that's the third section out of 4 in the book. The first section is how do we get here? The second section is what is the heart underneath and behind and in the rules, such that when we actually get to them, I would maybe want to listen to them or engage with them. We're beginning that section today. We're in section 2 of the Deuteronomy series that I've called The Heart of the Law. And we're beginning that today with a sermon that I've titled, God Gives Laws So That You'll Live. We're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 1 to 8. The text is up on the screen, and I will read it out loud. And now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the rules that I am teaching you, and do them, that you may live, and go in and take possession of the land that the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you. You shall not add to the word that I command you, nor take from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor. For the Lord your God destroyed from among you all the men who followed the Baal of Peor, but you who held fast to the Lord your God are all alive today. See, I have taught you statutes and rules, as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do them in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. Keep them and do them, for that will be your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples, who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call upon him? And what great nation is there that has statutes and rules so righteous as all this law that I set before you today? There are 3 things, according to this passage, that the law is about. In good pastor form, I've made them all start with L, so that you can have your 3 L's. You're wonderful. Don't. You're going to come to church and you're going to get an alliterative list that's probably about 3 things long, and you can take that to the bank. 3 things the law is about. It's about living, it's about listening, and it's about looking. Let's start with living, verse 1 and 3 to 4. Let's just look at these texts again. And now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the rules that I am teaching you, and do them, that you may live, and go in and take possession of the land that the Lord your God, your fathers, is giving you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor, for the Lord your God destroyed from among them all the men who followed the Baal Peor. But you who held fast to the Lord your God are all alive today. This is a purpose text. The beginning of our text today is a purpose text. It has a purpose logic. It's not just saying, hey, here are the rules, listen to them. It's saying why you should. And the surprising purpose that is laid out in this passage is that you should follow the rules because they will make you live. We have all sorts of different things that we think the rules are about. We're going to come back to them. But the one clear thing that we want to look just straight in the face in this moment is that the purpose for God's law is that people would live and that they would live a good life. These words "and now" that are right there at the beginning of the thing, they're so powerful because they're swinging, again, this literary swing from chapters 1 to 3 now to verse 4 and 11. We did the how do we get here? Let's remember the thing. This is how we got here. This is what we got right. This is what we got wrong. Blah, 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 blah. Here we are. And now, right? You can feel the force of those. It's a big movement in the book of Deuteronomy into, now I'm going to tell you why you should listen to these words at all. I'm going to tell you why, and the number one thing that you need to know is that if you listen to the words of this law, you will live. In the context of Deuteronomy, there's sort of a part 2 to this, which is you may live, you may go in and take possession of the land. This is the particular mode of life that God has called the children of Israel to in this moment. He has a home for them, and he's saying you'll be able to go in and live the life in the land that I'm giving to you if you follow these rules. He's not just saying you'll live generally. He's saying you will live a particular life, the life that I've called you to live in the promised land. And this is, there's a number of things to say about this, but again, in the immediate context, this is really, really important because as we've seen already from the how did we get here portion, the children of Israel were pretty sure that they would not be able to enter the land because the cities over there in Canaan are super well guarded and the people are super, super tall. And so we're not going to be able to do anything to take that land. We're certainly not going to be able to remain in it if we live in it. And so God is saying, I know that you have a fear that you're going to be unable to live the life that I've called you to live. That you're going to try it and you're going to get booted out or you're going to die or terrible things are going to happen to you. And so when he says you will live, there's real freight in the context of the passage in terms of what the children of Israel are worried about in terms of going into the promised land. This longer part of the passage in verses 3 to 4 are also about this, the idolatry and adultery that happened at the edge of Moab. This thing about the Baal Peor, basically in Numbers, when God's children were just passing by the edge of Moab, they were like, hey, look at Moab's gods. They look good. And interestingly, you can do this weird ritual sex thing while you worship them. Let's do that. I like that kind of worship. And so God was like, stop that. And so the text says that he struck down the people who were practicing that. And then in our passage today, it says, but you who held fast to the Lord your God, you're alive today. Again, what is the point? You follow the laws and you will live. And so that verses 3 to 4 is used as additional justification for the idea that if you follow God's laws, you will live. You may have a question about the God struck them down part. I'm not going to deep dive that in this sermon because a couple sermons ago, I really deep dived it. And you can go back and find that. That's on YouTube. It's in there. It's from the sermon that's about an hour and 15 minutes long. You can get in there and find it. And oh gosh, blessing of blessings. Somebody came up to me the other day and said, hey, I was in a conversation with a coworker and random thing, how you get into these conversations at work. Someone had a question about violence in the Old Testament, and I was able to just rattle off a handful of things. I was like, oh, God, my life matters. Everything matters. One person, one conversation, praise God. So if you go back and engage with those things, I guarantee you at some point you're going to be talking to someone where their obstacle for faith are, what about that violence in the Old Testament passage? You can go back and engage with that and be prepared to give an answer for the hope that is in you. If you follow the law, you will live. That's the purpose in this passage. Now, here's the thing. I want to pull out two things for you to think about. Interesting thing. If we need laws in order to live, like laws, rules, statutes in this passage, a legislative code, if we need laws in order to live and to live a good life, what does that implicitly mean? It means that we don't know what we're doing. Amen. It means that we don't know what we're doing. We don't really know how to be alive. We don't know how to live and to live a good life. And that's why we need some rules and some laws and some statutes. I know that we like to think, I don't need those things, get off me, whatever. Again, the number of laws. I asked a couple weeks ago, ChatGPT, to tell me how many laws are in the United States legislative code. It literally wasn't able to do it. It gave me an estimate, and it was like in the millions, maybe tens of millions of things. When you actually break it down, it's so complicated, all the sub-statutes. Can you rattle off a number for us? It's like the best it could do would be like we could estimate in the millions or something. It was like an insane number because it takes a ton of rules to get a large group of people to figure out how to live together because it's not built in us for whatever reason. Somehow we don't know what we're doing, and so we kind of need to be told. I don't mean that from an authoritarian context. You're not coming to church saying, authority, the pastors hit me over the head with authority. I'm saying there's something going on in human nature, if we would think reflexively about it for just a second, that obviously lets me know, like something's wrong in here. I don't know what I should be doing. I don't know. Humans somehow don't know what we are supposed to be doing. It wasn't this way all the time. Because you may remember, you wonderful, beloved students of the Bible, that in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, we apparently only needed one rule. So we knew how to do everything else. We knew what we were supposed to do in every other situation except don't go touch that tree. And what that actual rule is about is a deeper philosophical, theological thing, whatever. But the point I want to make right now, we needed one rule. And also for those of you who are here today thinking that God is a rules-obsessed maniac, let me just, do God a solid here and remind everyone that God wanted to make one rule. God wanted to make a one-rule world. So for those of us who are like, God is a rules-obsessed maniac, get off my back with all these laws. God's like, I tried. I tried to put you in a world where you could just hear one rule. And yet something went wrong there. And now we live in a world with many rules, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of billions of rules because we don't know what we're doing. Think about how strange this is. There's no other creature that needs laws like this in order to know what they're supposed to be doing. They all know what they're supposed to be doing. Why are we the only ones? There are no cat councils creating cat laws. There aren't. I know, it's silly. Maybe there's a cognitive capacity. We could talk about more intelligent animals. We could talk about certain kinds of chimpanzees and monkeys and macaques and whatever it is. All of them seem like they know what they're supposed to be doing. Just think about this. I know it's silly, but it's not. Think about it. Even when they're like participating in like the stuff of the natural world, like, that predator shouldn't be killing that prey. Well, actually they should. They should because that's how the natural world works. What they don't do is like overeat. There's no zebra horde. There aren't like prides of lions that are like corralling the zebras into a pen before they need them so the other lions starve. They're like, we eat when we're supposed to and we do it and we don't eat more and we're done. As everyone else knows. You and I have no clue what it is we are supposed to be doing because we're fallen and those other creatures aren't. Those other creatures weren't made up here in proximity to God and now find themselves down here. Those other creatures are just going along the way that they were made to, participating in the rhythms of the natural world. But you and I were made to stand at a very great height, and we have fallen in imaginable distance. And one of the ways that we can just look at ourselves and humanity for a second and see that just basic empirical proof of the fall is that all of a sudden now we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We don't know what it is to be human anymore. We don't know what it is to do good. We don't know what it is to live in right relationship with God. We need to be told. We need to be instructed, and that is why God gives us laws. We need to be told how to live, and so God gives us His law. Laws are about helping fallen creatures learn how to live, how to be alive, how to be a human, and how to live a good life. I know that we think that rules are about nitpicking and killing my fun and people going on power trips. And of course they are, because there are a lot of bad rules in the world and bad rule givers in the world. And so we experience those things all the time. But just because we experience the worst version of what they are doesn't mean that we should take that and map that onto God. God is a good rule giver. He's a gracious Father. He's a good lawgiver, and He gives us rules and laws so that we will live and we will know how to live well. Rules, they really do actually make life possible. You know this implicitly when you play games. I don't know if any of you are game players. My family's from the Midwest, so we like to play cards. We love to play cards. We love our card games. We're so simple, us Midwesterners. We love our card games. Cards without rules are just shapes and colors on a piece of paper. You can't play any games with them until you say what the rules are. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you have any game that you like to play, anything at all where you're like, wow, I love that. There's joy when I'm running around and chasing that ball and taking that trick and pushing that button, whatever it is. The life of the play doesn't exist until someone goes, you can't do that. And that's out of bounds, and this is worth more than that, and that's illegal. The whole thing, you don't make those rules to kill people's fun. You make them to bring the life into being. Rules function this way. There are certain kinds of life and joy and all these sorts of things that are only possible because certain kinds of rules exist. What's more, they don't just create life, they protect you from things that will ruin your life. They protect you from things that will kill you and harm you and hurt you and maim you. There was a man in 1995-ish named Billy Bob Harrell Jr. He hated his job, working his job, hated it, and saw the people with more money and more financial means and began to fantasize about what it would be like to have a different job and different life and more money and how good it would be and all this sort of stuff. And so he started playing the lottery. And he played the lottery and played the lottery and played the lottery. And one day in June 1997, his fantasies came true and he won. He won $31 million, which in 1997, was also, I hear 31 million, you're like, wow, is that life-changing money? I don't know, it's right on the edge. But in 1997, that was life-changing money. All his fantasies came true. Looked around at all the other things that people had. Incredible. I won. I've got this money. Our life is going to be different. But you know where this is going. You know already how his life was totally ruined by all the money that they got. You know about all the people who came asking for money and all the conflicts that created. He couldn't say no. His wife couldn't say yes. They're fighting over these things all the time. You know about all the stress that came from all the ways they upgraded their life. They were humble people. Now they've got this great new house. They've got new things. Other people are interested in them now. Now they got people coming around that weren't. And how are they handling all that attention, all these sorts of things? And then all the fights that come with the money and all this sort of stuff put a huge strain on his life, on their family, their kids, their marriage. In 1999, 2 years after they won the lottery, his wife filed for divorce. I don't want to do this anymore. 3 months later, his kids were trying to get into Billy Bob's house, couldn't get in. Son broke the door down, and Billy Bob had pointed a shotgun at his chest, killed himself. He left a note behind for his wife that said, "I didn't want this, I just wanted you." Exodus 20, verse 17 says, "You shall not covet." Because God's a rules-obsessed person who wants to ruin your life. That's why he's giving you all these rules. You shall not covet. One rule that would protect you from all of the terrible things that come from coveting other people's stuff and imagining, what if my life were different or better, or if only I had that thing, I'd have everything I want. One rule to protect you from something that will eat you alive if you give into it. This is what God's rules are about. Trying to help you live and to protect you from things that will kill you. And this is why God has given you rules. Where are you with God's rules and God's laws? Are you annoyed by them? Do you trust them? There's a big multi-generational get-off-me impulse that is just sort of in our time. I don't know, maybe you're just swimming in that stream, thinking other people's thoughts and pretending that they're yours. God's rules are awful. I hate them. God loves you. He loves you. He loves you. He loves you. And so he's given you wise rules and wise instruction to help you live in this time and to make a good life possible for you. That's why he's given you rules. It's not enough, however, for God to give you laws. You and I have to choose to listen to them. The rules are about living, but the rules are also about listening. We have to listen to the things that God says. Deuteronomy 4, 1, 2, and 5. Let's look at these texts again. "And now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the rules that I am teaching you and do them, that you may live, and go in and take possession of the land that the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you. You shall not add to the word that I command you, nor take from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you." Going on, Moses says again, "See, I have taught you statutes and rules, as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do them in the land that you are entering to take possession of it." We see that repetition there of Moses in verse 5 going out of his way to say, God's given you commands, but he's given me commands as well. I'm faithfully discharging my end of the bargain. What are you going to do with respect to yours? The thing with the rules is that they have to be listened to, and you and I can, put our fingers in our ears and go la, 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 and, all the things that we do to say I'm not listening to, or maybe in a more self-deceived way, we can, listen to these narratives or ideas that talk about God being this rules-obsessed, being that's he's out to get me, whatever it is. All things that we do to really take my listening off the table when God is trying to say, listen to these wise rules and standards that I have for you. We need to be able to open up our ears and listen. There are two more things. This text obviously says listen, okay, listen. But there are two more things that this text says in relationship to listening that help us to get clearer about what it is to listen. The text says, and do them, right? Verse 1 says, and now Israel, listen to the statutes and do them. Because listening, when it's actually been done, inevitably leads to doing. Listening inevitably becomes action. If the person listening has a soft heart. If you take functional ears and attach them to a soft-hearted person, what you will then see that person do is do the things that they have heard. That is just how that cycle naturally works. If you take functional ears and then see that person not do the things that they're being told to do, well, their heart is hard. Because it's hard-heartedness in me that keeps me from doing the things that I've otherwise heard that I am supposed to do. Ears plus a soft heart leads to action. We're supposed to do the things. That's what it means to listen, is doing. Additionally, listening means listening to the whole thing. It means listening to every little detail of what's been said. The text goes out of its way to make this clear in verse 2. You shall not add to the word that I commanded you, nor take from it. You won't add or take away any little thing. That's what it is to listen. Some of us are like, yeah, I'm listening to God, but it's like I got 40% of what he said to me about that thing, and I've got the gist, and then I filled the rest of it in with, that song I listened to recently, and its ethos, and, my idea, and my desires, and it's like you're listening to 100% of the thing, or you're listening to 0% of it. To listen well is to say, I'm going to hear the whole thing. I will not add to or take away from it at all. God gives us law so that we will live. How are you listening? What is your listening like? How's your listening to people, let alone just to God? Like, how do you hear other people? Like, would people, if they, would give just an honest assessment of who you and I am, would they say, that's a soft-hearted listening person? Like, when I bring something to them, it always makes a difference in who they are and how they act. Are you soft-hearted when you hear other people? If you're not soft-hearted when you hear other people, you're probably also not soft-hearted when you are hearing from God. We need to be able to listen well to the things that God says to us. And I want to take just an additional second to camp out on the idea of hard-heartedness and how hard-heartedness can stop up my ears, can keep me unwilling to hear, either unable to hear or going out of my way to make it so that I can't hear. Hebrews 3:15, quoting a different Old Testament psalm, says this, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. Both the Old Testament and the New Testament contain exhortations to us today to not be hard-hearted and to be willing to hear and willing to listen. Where in your life are you unwilling to hear? Who are you unwilling to hear from? I have to confess, in my life, the people that it's the hardest to hear from are the people that I'm closest to. I'm so ridiculously, at times unreasonably hard-hearted towards my spouse. There it is, there's my confession. I'm married to an incredible woman. I love my spouse. We have so many things that are wonderful in our life. I don't know what it is about the ruin that's gone on in here and the sin nature that threatens to run me all the time. But my wife will say things to me and ask me for things that I experience a hardness of response that I would not experience anywhere else. Literally anyone else in the world could ask me for that thing. And when my spouse does, something just clenches up. What is happening? I don't know. And then I'm acting out of that thing and I'm speaking out of it. And I'm like, well, you shouldn't have done that. And you did that wrong. And you whatever. And it's like, melt. Frozen heart, melt. Thaw. Soften. Be exchanged for a heart of flesh. Take a moment to think about the people that you're in relationship with. You're like, why am I just a rock every time? What is that? God, soften my heart. Soften my heart. Make me soft-hearted in response to you. Help me to listen to what you have to say. Let me set down my knee-jerk defensiveness and self-protectiveness and all these things that I justify that really at the end of the day are just that I've got a little rock thumping away in here. Help me to soften so that I can listen to you. You've got good things to say to me. You love me. You're trustworthy. Give me a soft, thawed heart. God, soften your heart in this moment before the Lord of heaven and earth and whatever image bearer God has brought close to you that you struggle to listen to. You know, there's just a last thing that can happen for us in this moment, especially when we're thinking about people and why I'm justified in my hard-heartedness. We start to do the tally. We do the scorekeeping. Well, Adam, you're right. I am hard-hearted towards this person, but you don't know what they've done to me. You just don't know. Here are the things, and if you would have heard them say that, and this is the thing that I'm holding on to from 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is, it's all the things, you add them all up, and I just have a really good reason to be really hard-hearted and really defensive. And of course, there's an initial word to that is like, yeah, like we hurt one another. We make it hard to hear one another. Those things are true. And yet to have that replace my basic desire to have a soft heart towards someone is not right. And the way that we know it's not right is because we can just compare my tally with that person to God's tally with me. And we can just say, when God has looked at the me-him tally and has decided that it's long enough now for him to be hard-hearted towards me, that's the moment at which it's going to be okay for me to just be constantly hard-hearted towards this other person. You know, the tally, it's just unimaginably long. Oh my goodness, you and I, you know, we think we're patient, we think we're gracious, we think we're long-suffering. The Old Testament loves to remind us that God is long-suffering, that the tally just goes on and on and on and on for the things that God has every right to be annoyed about with us or hurt about, or we just peeved him in this way, or big egregious things that we got wrong. Any of these things, thank God that list, seen through the eyes of your heavenly Father, has never, ever led to God being hard-hearted towards you. When God is hard-hearted towards you, then you can begin to feel some permission to be okay with just being chronically hard-hearted towards somebody else. Spoiler alert, it's never going to happen. God is soft-hearted towards you, though he has every right to not be. Who's someone in your life today that you can be soft-hearted towards? Even though you, in some human sense, may feel like you have a right to not be. The laws are about living. The laws are about listening. Finally, laws are about looking. And in particular, how other people will look at us as a result of the way that we do or don't live according to God's law. Deuteronomy 4, 6-8 says this, "Keep them and do them, for that will be your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples, who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people, for what great nation is there that has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call upon him? And what great nation is there that has statutes and rules so righteous as all this law that I set before you today?" Moses says, your neighbors will encounter your laws, and they will encounter the life that you live as a result of the fact that you're keeping those laws. And they will see that you are a great people living a great life under the guidance of a great God. They will look and they will see something more than just rule keeping. They will see a great people loved and protected by a great God. This happened in the ancient world, by the way. To be fair, you know, the ancient Jews had a lot of different responses from their neighbors, and there were people who, especially about those dietary laws, were like, why do the Jewish people, abstain from pigs? And I could pull those texts for you today, but I've just pulled one text from an ancient author. He goes by the name of Longinus, but actually we don't know who the heck wrote this text, but he wrote it sometime in the 1st or 2nd century CE, sometime around the time of the life of Jesus, and he wrote this about the lawgiver of the law of Moses. He said, in this manner meaning speaking in a way that's worthy of divinity. That's what he's trying to praise here, speaking in a way that's worthy of divinity. He says, in this manner, also the lawgiver of the Jews, no ordinary man, since he recognized and expressed divine power according to its worth, expressed that power clearly when he wrote at the beginning of his laws, and God said, what? Let there be light, and there was light. And let there be land, and there was land. Interestingly, some of you have noticed that when he says at the beginning of his laws, he's wrapping all the way back to the book of Genesis, which when we talk about the law, I've told you this at the beginning of the sermon series, now are we just talking about Deuteronomy, talking about the whole Pentateuch, Genesis through Deuteronomy, here we are, okay, the laws. But he looks at it and says, look at the way that those laws wrote about God. They wrote about God in a wonderful and praiseworthy way. And here's one Gentile person looking at the text of those laws saying, that rightly reflects God. This pattern of people around the world being able to look at God's people and seeing the way that we live, and from that deriving the sense that we've had good guidance, and from that deriving the sense that we had a good guide, like that system's supposed to be happening all the time. People are supposed to look at us and the laws that we live by, and they're supposed to be able to see a good way of life because people want a good life. People want a good life. They want to live a good life. They want to live a good way of life. They want to be able to live a certain way that's going to pay out a certain good way of life. They're supposed to be able to look at Christians and see that on display. And so they are looking at us, and they're supposed to see us being able to love God through God's law and loving other people as God's law leads us into that. When people look at your life, what do they see? When people look at my life, what do they see? When people look at our life, what do they see on display? Do they see, interesting question, any laws on display? Like, do they see, like, those are the patterns that that person has lived by that has led them to live a good life? Are those things on display? And how, if someone were to emulate your life and the patterns and laws that you've lived by, like, would that benefit them or would that harm them? These are sobering questions for us to engage with as we think about the fact that God expects that as we live according to his law, other people are going to look at it and be blessed by it. And you and I know that ultimately on this point, we fail. We fail to live in the way that God has called us to live, where we're stuck up in our defensiveness and our get off me impulse, or we're foolish for too long, or whatever it is. And so we've got all kinds of chaos and disorder and all sorts of things and hurt and harm that's self-inflicted in our lives. And so people look at us and our lives look kind of just as chaotic and happenstance as everybody else's. We don't reflect that God's near to us because we don't live like he is. We don't live with faith and trust. We don't reflect that God is righteous because people don't look at us and see righteous lives with righteous conduct. We don't follow God's law. We don't reflect a good way of life. And so we often sow in ourselves and in the lives of other people the opposite of what the laws are trying to bring us, which is a worse life, which ultimately leads to death. I mean, just to map this all the way on now, the laws are supposed to bring life. So when we don't live according to them, there's only one other path to walk. When we're talking about life and death here, there's two roads. I live according to the one and I receive the life, or I don't and I get that other thing. This is where we are headed, and this is the kind of life that we model to other people. And so it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful news that God, who's already been loving and gracious and kind to give us laws in the first place, was gracious and loving and kind again to come to earth and die the death that you and I are supposed to die when we don't live according to the rules. Because when we don't live according to the law, that road pays out death. And yet Jesus Christ showed up and walked around on earth and walked to the end of that path, even though he deserved the life path, and said, I'm going to walk all the way to the end of the death road for you so that you don't have to. I'm going to substitute myself and die the death that you should have died so that you can live the life that I should have lived. This is what God has done for us in coming to earth in Jesus Christ. Laws are about bringing life. When we don't follow them, we get death. That's just the way that it works. And in our lack of following the laws, we die. Jesus took our place and substituted himself and died that death for us. And because he is not just any old person, he is God's son, he is able to die for all of humanity on our behalf in his one single death, once for all. 1 Peter 2:24 says this, he himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. Jesus is the fulfillment of the life and the laws that they promise because he died our death for us in our stead. And then because he was sinless, the law of life paid out for him anyways. He stood in our place and died our death and took on all of our punishment and the penalties and the guilt and all those sorts of things. And yet because he in himself was sinless and bore in with him the life of God, he got to experience in his resurrection the benefits of having followed the law pay out for him anyways. And we've seen in the life of the resurrection, the life that the law points us to. And we know that that's just one additional sign, one little sign of the good land and a home that God has for us ultimately, not in a world without rules, but in a world beyond them, where the rules pay out for us what they always were supposed to pay out, which is life with God and loving other people in a heavenly land. Jesus is the fulfillment of this passage. He has drawn near to us. He is close to us, and he is righteous. He fulfills God's law and is exemplary in sacrificing himself on your behalf. And now he asks every person to believe in him and receive that he died in their place and to ask him to raise them up on the last day. You should believe in Jesus and receive God's law. A few things I want to say on this point. You should receive God's law. You can't live without the rules. The good life that you and I want to live, there are a certain number of rules that need to be followed in order to live that good life. Not only that, there are certain rules that God gives us to protect us from ruining our lives. All of Deuteronomy 4 through 11 is about preparing Israel to say yes to God's law when they start to hear it in chapter 12. We get 7 chapters that are about preparing them to say yes when they begin to hear God's laws. You and I need similar preparation. We can't live without the rules, and yet we need to humble ourselves and receive them and allow God to soften our hearts. And if God dying for us, not only could he have taken all that ledger tally and hardened his heart, not only did he not do that, but he died for us in addition to that. If that doesn't soften our hearts, if that isn't enough, nothing will soften them. We need to be able to have our hearts softened so that we can receive God's law. Secondly, however, receive God's grace. Committing to receiving God's instruction in your life now because of the death of Jesus Christ doesn't mean living this life of oppression and fear at getting stuff wrong. Because we're on this side of the cross, we can receive God's law and receive God's grace in the law at the same time. In other words, you don't have to get all the rules right in order to take the rules on in your life. Shockingly, there's no earthly analogy for this, by the way. The idea that there's a set of rules that I can engage with seriously, but not have to be worried about the penalties. If you were to think about that, it's what I don't know, maybe you had a parent who set up a structure where they were teaching you something, and so they gave you certain rules, but they just had all kinds of grace for you and you broke them, right? In general, in the world, when we encounter rules, there are penalties. And so my rule following is always in part motivated by the fear of the penalty. It turns out that an experience of grace is a way better motivator for following the rules than the fear of the penalty ever was. And that's the environment that God has put you in by asking you to follow the rules in the context of the grace that he has won for you through his death on the cross. Receive God's law, but also receive God's grace. And finally, receive Jesus. Receive his sacrifice, his example, and his power. In his sacrifice, he frees you from the condemnation of the rules and the penalty that rule breaking is supposed to pay out. Receive his example, because what more than someone dying on our behalf could soften our hearts? What more than his sacrificial love could create in us the kind of admiration that would say, I want to live the kind of life that you lived? And finally, receive his power, because Jesus has actual power when you call on his name to begin to change and soften your heart so that you can live the good life that God has laid out for you. Believe in Jesus, receive God's law, live the life that God made you to live. Do these things and live. Amen.